on the Kakehashi project and the connections between Montana and Japan. The Mansfield Center was so excited to be able to host the Kakehashi project, which is sponsored by the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Japan and the Japan Foundation, and give 23 of our students here at UM, both graduates and undergraduates, as well as two fantastic chaperones, Brian Dowdle of the Japanese department and Estella Anderson of the business school, the chance to travel to Japan on a 9-day trip to learn more about Japan's culture and economy and the relationships between the United States and Japan. We have 5 of our participants here today to tell us about the program, some of their experiences, and what they've really learned about just how much this very important international relationship matters. This was a particularly special program for the Mansfield Center as a way to honor our legacy with Senator Mike Mansfield, who is also Ambassador Mike Mansfield and one of the longest serving ambassadors to Japan. Today's presentation is being recorded by Missoula Community Access Television as part of a media access grant given to the Mansfield Center. We are always very grateful for their presence, and this program can also be viewed online at www.mcat.org. I will now let our participants introduce themselves and tell us a bit about their experiences. Okay.
I'm Asia Kalori. I'm studying Management Information Systems over at the business school. So this was a really great experience for all of us. We had the opportunity to hear different lectures about the relations between Japan and the United States. We learned a lot about the TPP, which good to know, even though it didn't quite pan out for us. Go ahead and introduce yourself.
Hi, my name is Laura Kakehashi. I'm studying economics here at the University of Montana. And I agree with Asia. The Kakehashi program was an amazing opportunity to go somewhere that I personally would not be able to visit otherwise and really experience a new culture. And even though there are so many differences in between Missoula, Montana, and Japan, it was really incredible to see the similarities in the work that both the University of Montana and the Kakehashi program, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs in Japan, and just the Japanese government as a whole, all the work they've done into creating good, strong international relations.
My name is Claire Bergovi, and I'm an ecological restoration major and an environmental studies minor. And yeah, I'll echo what they said. It was a really amazing opportunity. And it was so cool to be able to go there and then visit Kumamoto, which is our sister province kind of to the entire state of Montana, and meet a lot of people who had been to Missoula and knew what was going on here, and were really just excited to show us Japan. I'm going to talk about that a little bit more once we get started here.
Yeah. My name is Shaylee Rager, and I'm a journalism student here at the university. And I think one of my favorite parts of the trip was all the history that we got to learn and the cultural differences. And so that's what I'll be talking about in my presentation, just a lot about the history. So yeah, it was a really great experience.
My name is Brooke Bigley. I am a communication studies major, emphasis in communication, human relationships. And my focus, I guess, within my field is intercultural communication. So I was really excited to get to experience Japan and learn more about the culture firsthand versus just reading about it, and kind of analyze the similarities and differences between our cultures. There are a lot of different dimensions, but also a lot of similarities, and kind of like what these ladies said, it was really cool to see that a lot of people in Japan and Kumamoto specifically know a lot about what's going on in Missoula and at the university, and that our ties are really strong. And it was just really, it was really cool to be so welcomed in a culture that's so different than ours, and just, reminding ourselves that we're all people, and that no matter what culture we're from, there are just a lot of similarities, a lot of things we have in common. So I'll be talking a little bit more about that in my presentation as well.
All right. Oh, there we go. Okay, so I can kind of start us off here. Like I mentioned, we were in Japan at the same time and participating in this project at the same time as 4 other universities. There was the University of Hawaii and then 2 universities from
Tennessee.
Tennessee, thank you. I almost said Kentucky. Tennessee. And so we were kind of in the same general group for the first couple days in Tokyo, and then they sent us off to different areas of Japan. The other groups got sent to Nara and Sapporo. And then we got sent to Kumamoto because we have the state ties down in Kumamoto. So you can see Kumamoto's down on the southern island of Kyushu. It's that province that's in red. And there was actually a lot of interesting similarities that I noticed, at least between Kumamoto and Montana. There's a lot of agricultural production there. That's one of their main industries there, similar to Montana. A lot of the people we met knew about UM, were alums of UM, and like had been to Montana, knew about the Mansfield Center. There's a branch of the Mansfield Center in Kumamoto City there. We met some people who worked with them. We were out in this tiny, tiny little agricultural town at this really cool farm-to-table restaurant that they brought us to, and the chef's son had spent a semester here at Hellgate High School, and he like came out in his Montana sweatshirt and was like, "Yeah, Missoula!" And we were all like, "Oh my god!" And that was a complete surprise. Like nobody had actually planned that. Nobody knew that his son had gone to school at Hellgate. So there was a lot of really cool stuff like that happening. So I'm gonna actually show a quick video here, and this is, click on that or get to that. This is, before we go there, that's Kumamon. He's the mascot of Kumamoto, and he's everywhere, and he was one of our favorites. But one of the other groups, or one of the other people on this program made this video compilation, and I think this video does a really good job of kind of showing what we were doing there, but also like just how welcoming and kind everyone was, and how excited everybody was to like show us around and show us the city and show us, take us on tours. We had the opportunity to tour like a lot of different industries in Kumamoto. Like, was it?
We did the Sony factory.
Sony factory.
They, I don't remember the specific part of this.
They build semiconductors used in cameras,
iPhone cameras.
And then there was also the Honda, their biggest motorcycle manufacturer.
Yeah. And then the Docomo, which was actually outside of Tokyo, but it's like the biggest wireless company in Japan. And yeah, everyone was just really excited to show us, very welcoming. It was really nice. And one of the interesting things, this is all still in Tokyo, so I'm a little bit ahead of myself in what I'm explaining as to what's going on up there. But and then the other interesting thing about Kumamoto, which I'm sure some of you guys are going to touch on soon as well, is that they had a really massive earthquake the spring before we visited. So we were there in November, and that happened in April, I believe. And so one of the most interesting things that we learned about at all the places we were going was the amazing earthquake recovery efforts, and how quickly like the Sony factory had massive, massive damages. And they were back at work something like 3 weeks after the earthquake, and working and like repairing all of their machines and their factory while also producing these semiconductors at the rate that they were before the earthquake. And we also were able to visit with Kumamoto Prefecture, like the prefectural government, and they were talked a lot about recovery efforts as well.
I think a lot of that really spoke to like the community efforts there, and like how community, like obviously here we're much more like individual based, which everybody knows that like Japan is more of a community based culture, but just like seeing how they all really did like work together as a full community, like the entire area of Kumamoto, like supported each other in rebuilding all of the manufacturing sites, all their different businesses, government offices. That was interesting.
The footage of us in the restaurant that just happened, just went by, that was a restaurant owned by somebody who graduated from the business school here. And he went back to Kumamoto City where he was born and opened a German beer house. And it was this, you walked in and it looked like we were in like the Bavarian Alps or something. And he was serving all German food but with like a little Japanese twist. He had like, oh my god, like there was a ham hock like this big on every single table with like different dipping sauces and sausages and like German pizza. And all of the people, there were a lot of people from the Mansfield Center branch in Kumamoto and from their local government there who were also met with us at that restaurant, and I think that was one of my favorite nights.
I thought that was the best night.
It was so fun, and everyone was, yeah, just having a good time in the German restaurant in Japan with the Americans. It's a very cross-cultural experience. Yeah, so this is finishing up now.
I feel like this video is a really good representation of how much we did in 9 days. And it was like so planned to a T, which was amazing. And so we saw, you know, so much in a span of 9 days, and that was really on the part of the people who organized the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and JICE, which was really great.
Oh, and there's Endo-san. Endo-san was the our guide the entire time. She took us everywhere and
She is
was
fantastic.
one of the most lovely human beings I've ever met.
Yes.
Yeah, we can go back to the PowerPoint now.
Where's my full screen option?
Present.
Yeah. These are just a couple of photos. This is us at the restaurant, the farm to table restaurant where his son had gone to school here, with some really, really delicious food. And then that's us at the German restaurant I was talking about with a lot of Mansfield Center employees over there. And those are our guides from Kumamoto, who also showed us around a lot there. Yeah, that's kind of all I've got for my portion.
Sure. Yeah.
I'll
So
hand it to you.
I was going to talk about something really specific, I guess, actually. So Kumamoto Castle. This was probably my favorite day of our trip. Was when we got to tour Kumamoto Castle, which again we said is in the Kumamoto Prefecture on the island of Kyushu. And I think when you go to another country, you know, from the U.S., it's so interesting and so cool to see something so old because we don't have things like this in the U.S. So the first fortifications of this castle were built in 1467. And actually a lot of what you see here was reconstructed in 1960. So a lot of this isn't the original, but there are some buildings, some wooden buildings that are like the original fortifications that were built in 1467 and then greatly expanded in 1601. So I just was going to talk about that for a little bit because I just thought it was so cool to see, you know, how big this castle complex was. It was a mile east to west, and we toured the whole thing. We walked around outside, and one of the, I'll get to it in a couple slides, but it was really unfortunate because they had just had their earthquake in Kumamoto, and a lot of the castle had been destroyed, so we couldn't go inside the castle complex, which is usually open to visitors. So, but we did get to tour the outside, and it was really cool. So just kind of the history of this castle. Like I said, it's been, you know, it was built in 1467, but a lot of it was actually destroyed in the, I believe it's called the Satsuma Rebellion. But the fortifications, the outside fortifications were actually never broken through, but a lot of the castle was destroyed in that rebellion. But you can see there's the moat on the outside, and this castle is really well known for its curved stone walls, which is why it was such a strong fortification. And it has been named one of the three premier castles in Japan, which is again so cool that we got to see that. And it's just so representative of the architecture in Japan, and I thought that was really cool for us to see as well. So as you can see see, like I was talking about, the stone walls, and they're very steep. And so there's 49 turrets also that are around the castle, and it was very well known for being an extremely well built and strong castle in Japan. So, like I was talking, we've all mentioned this, but there was a really horrible earthquake. It was a 6.2 magnitude earthquake in Kumamoto in April of 2016. So we were there really recently after that had happened. So you can see the damage here in these photos of what happened to the castle, which I think is so sad. You know, again, it's so old, built in the 1400s. But as Claire talked about, the community has already started to rebuild this castle and has already started to reconstruct it. And I think that's really special that, you know, in this culture, they keep those traditions. They're so important to them. And I think that's really, you know, something that the U.S. could learn as well, that, you know, these are really important things that we should, you know, maintain and, you know, just keep up. So I think that was really cool. And that was just something, you know, culturally, I felt like Kumamoto Castle was a really good representation of Japan, and I really enjoyed the history of the trip and the history of the places that we visited.
One of the things about they were doing when they were rebuilding it was like each stone in the walls where it's numbered, and they were putting it back together like a jigsaw puzzle because it was all held together. Like there wasn't like caulking or anything holding it together other than the way that the stones were placed. And so this lady was like showing us this picture of how carefully they were piecing it back together, and if stones had shattered, they had to find replacements that were like the same.
Right.
It was just a really impressive restoration effort.
Yeah,
with that.
they really care about their history, which is really cool. So
I just want to add that in.
yeah.
Does anybody want to talk about that?
Oh, did you?
Yeah.
This was awesome.
So we got to take this super windy road. I don't know how long that ride was. I know a few of us got very sick on it. But we ended up getting to this awesome volcano. I've never been to a volcano, so this is pretty exciting. You don't have the picture of Graydon on here, do you?
Oh, no, I don't.
Some people are backflipping on it. Mount Aso, are there a lot of, I don't remember how many volcanoes there were in that area.
So wasn't it Kumamoto is like in a crater that
It used to be a volcano.
like a super volcano?
I don't
like
wanna give
Kumamoto
wrong
is this huge
information.
valley, and then now there's Aso volcano, which is active and like on the top of where that crater
It was
was.
in like level 3 of eruption while we were there.
Yeah.
So it was just like belching smoke, as you can see.
It was really beautiful. We took the bus up to the visitor center and then kind of walked up to look at the volcano. It's really cool that, so they sent one of the groups, they sent the Hawaii group up north, and they got to experience snow. And then they sent us down south and we got to experience a volcano. And it was just really cool to see something that is just very much alive. And you know, when we were kind of driving around Kumamoto, we could see that the smoke from the volcano had kind of settled in the valley, just similarly to how the smoke from forest fire settles here in Missoula. And yeah, as they kind of mentioned, they experience earthquakes, hurricanes, and also volcano activity. And so it's amazing that the constant, I guess,
Natural disaster.
yeah, that they always have to prepare for, but there's really no way to fully prepare. So they're just constantly doing restoration. I think it brings people together, you know, knowing that your neighbor just lost their house or that their roof fell in, and it's let's rebuild it and then move on with life as usual. It doesn't seem to stop them from living their daily lives. Even though there's an active volcano just kind of looming above their town. So it's a really cool thing for us to see. So I'll talk, a little bit about cross-cultural competence. So that's kind of I'm really interested in cross-cultural communication and intercultural communication, and that's just how culture affects communication, regardless of language barriers. It's the norms and values present in every culture that it's easy to think like, oh, this is how Americans do it, this is how everyone does it, but that's just really not the case. And it can be as simple as a handshake, as eye contact, as distance standing from someone when you're first meeting them. I think a lot of people in the group experienced culture shock, just because the pace, when we first got into Tokyo, it's a very stimulating city, everything is built up. And yeah, they just have a lot of cultural norms that are different than ours. And so the few of the pictures I put here was the group just communicating with people in Japan and making really good friendships and connections. And we just learned a lot about I guess the ease of rapport that we can have with people when we're open to understanding what makes us different, but also the similarities that exist. So the middle picture is Brian. He's our chaperone. He's fluent in Japanese, and he was one of our guides. And we're at a train station in Tokyo, and he was very excitedly showing us how everything works. And it's very overwhelming. There are signs in English, but a lot of it is in Japanese. And so we were all just kind of like, we'll go wherever you go. We just don't want to get lost.
Our fearless leader.
Yeah, our fearless leader. And yeah, a few of the pictures are just us, kind of forming new relationships. And I think a lot of us have maintained a lot of those relationships, even though we're back in school and back in Montana.
Can I jump in about the business card?
Yeah, totally.
There is like this huge culture of exchanging business cards. So everywhere that we went, like even if we couldn't speak any Japanese and they couldn't speak any English, they would just like kind of shove their business cards at us. And I think some people emailed a lot of, like everybody was pretty much in email contact with a lot of the people we met in Japan, which is really cool. That just is in regards to Brooke saying that we built a lot of relationships over there.
Going back on that, I think it was also really interesting to see from a different cultural viewpoint, like how business cards were treated there versus here, where there was a certain formality about a business card where it was a representation of you and your professional career. And so they were treated they were still business cards, but they were treated very respectfully. So it was expected that if you were given a business card, you would keep that. It's not something you would toss in a folder and write on. Write notes on.
And it's a reflection of identity. I think when we look at it, I think is like, this is what I do. And I think just cultural differences, business cards in Japan are more very representative of the person as a whole, not just their profession. So, yeah.
And I felt like it represented like people really were taking interest in you. Like here it's like, oh, you want a business card, here you go, like pretty casual. But there it's like they really want to know who you are and just like know what you're about. So I don't know, it felt like they were like more involved in other people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's just a really quick slide, just about the differences in cultural dimensions between Japan and the U.S. And the way they're measured, at least in the communication field, is on these six different aspects. And as you can see, some of them are similar, some of them are very different. The U.S. is considered more of an individualistic culture, and Japan is more collective, but it's not as collectivistic as a lot of the other Asian cultures. And in terms of uncertainty avoidance, long-term orientation, the way I understand it at least, is that they kind of believe that life here is short, and that we should that they should, make it a point to live life as a very important thing, not just something to be wasted. And I think that's you could definitely see that in their culture. Let's switch to the next one. That's a good slide. So just a few things that I noticed in terms of a lot of the presentations we sat in on. It was mentioned that they have an aging population problem right now, and that they're in need of foreign workers coming in, and that it's hard for them to retain a lot of foreign workers. And I think that has a lot to do with the cultural differences, not just in communication and interpersonally, but also in the business world. And so a few things that stood out to me at least was that in terms of like time orientation, they prefer a lot of meetings, a lot of long meetings where things are hashed out in detail over long periods of time. And so we sat in on a lot of long lectures, which I think was, for us, we weren't really used to that. I think in American culture where it's like, you know, here's a PowerPoint presentation, let's get to the point and then move on. They have a slower way of doing things so that they make less mistakes. And that's just something that you have to get used to in whatever culture that you're living in. And for Japan, their work life is more of a priority than it is for us in the US. I think family and personal lives are a priority over work sometimes here, and for them, they kind of shape their lives around their work life. And so as we would go out to restaurants, we would see people participating in something called nomikai, which is a drinking party, and that was an opportunity for people to socialize after work and drink and just let loose, because that's not really something that they do in their workday. Whereas in the US, it's common for coworkers to get together for lunch, or to eat at their desks, or to you know, make friends at work and have really easy rapport. So it's just there's just a few of those differences that I think if people want to go work in Japan, they need to be aware of. Just aware of that kind of stuff. That's just a picture of some of the amazing, so like best food ever. Still the best food I've ever had in my life. Just a few pictures of that here. And yeah, that's all I have for pictures. Anybody else want to talk?
Well, I guess for me, I can say I think for everyone here and everyone else who participated in this program that it was an amazing experience, and what we show here today can't capture everything that we experienced and learned on this trip. But something that I felt really impacted me throughout this trip was seeing the dichotomy that is Japanese culture. And what I mean by that is there's such a blend of the old and the new, where it's like where you have Tokyo, the center of Tokyo, a large modern city, and small traditional towns. You have the preservation of traditional culture and this rapid development of new technologies. And I think one of the most profound things that we saw was it was this preservation of culture while trying to incorporate the outside world into Japan and become a more internationally connected country. And I think I speak for all of us when I say that we've learned more about the Trans-Pacific Trade Agreement than just about anyone else at the University of Montana. But one of the reasons I believe it was stressed to us so heavily, and honestly I believe it was one of the major reasons that this trip took place during this time, was because there was such a focus in Japan on expanding cultural relations and trying to build just new bridges in between countries and build strong trade routes with each other so they can have that influence of Japanese culture while learning from other cultures. And I believe that out of everything I learned on the trip, that was probably the most significant. In particular, when we were in Kumamoto, we had the opportunity to sit in on several business meetings, one of which was something that I'm personally interested in, which is agriculture. And it was a company that had been working in Kumamoto, so South Japan, and what they did is they connected rural farmers, because agriculture is a large part of Japanese culture and history. But what they were doing is they were bringing in new products from China and other countries to build these large international markets, but create new products with these using traditional methods in Japan and then bringing in new flavors. And so I believe that that's that company did a very good job at explaining just what Japan is trying to do now, bringing in the new, but preserving the old and pushing forward to create something better.
I think with the TPP thing, I'm not an economist. I didn't know anything about the TPP other than like the very basic of what it was before I went on this trip. And when it was announced that that wasn't going to be something that the U.S. was going to participate in, and it wasn't going to go through, I was like pretty sad about it, honestly, because I kept thinking about all the people who we had talked to in Japan who had been working on the TPP and like working on particularly the connection with the U.S. and the TPP and how important that was for them in terms of kind of shaping their own trade policy as opposed to having other powers in their area shape it. I was pretty saddened by the fact that the TPP didn't go through because of this experience and because of like the specific people we met and were involved with.
And I think, as in any country, there were conflicting opinions on whether the TPP would benefit Japan or if it would be detrimental to their economic state, etc. But I would agree that learning about that, like post-return, was difficult because of the amount of emphasis that they put on its importance to Japan in the future.
Any other thoughts before we open it up to some questions? I do have some questions as well. I'm going to move up here and snake Asia's seat. But would anyone in our audience like to ask any questions first? Yes.
I just wondered if you were exposed to how religion affects some of those things that you talked about in terms of relations, particularly Buddhism, in terms of the thought process of length of time, space.
I don't believe there was a lot of emphasis on that part of Japanese culture while we were there. We did have the opportunity to see in passings, like cemeteries that did combine both aspects of Buddhism and Shintoism, but honestly, I can't say that religion was something that was heavily focused on throughout this trip.
It was definitely part of the cultural experience. Like I said, we saw cemeteries and we visited some Shinto shrines and the big Buddhist temple in Tokyo, but in terms of them talking about like the economic side of things and the industry that they were focusing on, kind of teaching us while we were there, they didn't place a lot of focus on talking about that, which was kind of disappointing because I was interested in learning a little bit more about that cultural side of things.
I think when we visited a few shrines, and I personally bought a lot of like little charms and stuff, and I really like the importance that they place on those. And I hung one above my door, and I've given them to friends, and it's just a nice reminder that little tokens like that have a important story, and that it's very historical, and that that's just something we don't really do here, as predominantly as a Christian culture. I think we did see aspects of religion, but it wasn't emphasized as much as it maybe could have been. But it definitely plays into, I think, the way that people live their lives, the orientation, in terms of time orientation, and the beliefs in reincarnation. Just the way that they respect people and animals and the earth. And it's just, I don't know, that's why I love Asian cultures, is because of religious aspects such as Buddhism and Zen Buddhism and Shinto. It seems that there's just more of there's more respect for the things, everything around you, and yeah, there's less of a feeling of of permanence, I guess.
Well, so correct me if I'm wrong, but none of you had studied Japanese before going over there, correct? Can you talk a bit about why you wanted to be a part of this program and have the chance specifically to go to Japan, and if it's maybe changed your outlook either on the country or international relations?
Well, do you want to just go down the line?
Sure.
So I was interested in this trip. I'm not going to lie. I received an email from a different program that I'm in, and there was a little link that said, go to Japan for 10 days. And I was interested in that because, I mean, it was a trip to Japan for 10 days. I was interested in it. And so I went in fairly naive to what I was getting into. I knew it was a business trip, business-focused trip, but as I was there, I really developed an appreciation for Japan and its uniqueness. And I've actually, through the people that we've talked to and different programs there, I've actually decided to try to go and teach English there after I graduate. And I've decided to take some Japanese classes so I have some basic communication skills as opposed to what I think a lot of us experienced while we were there. So.
Yeah, I have not studied Japanese language or culture before, but I've always been interested in visiting Japan. I was just interested in the culture and the natural beauty there. And I decided to apply for this program because there was one line of the description that said there's going to be a little bit of focus on agriculture, and I'm really interested in agriculture. And so that's why I ended up applying. And I actually also have stayed in contact with some people there, and I'm planning on going back after I graduated, living there and working with some of the farmers we actually met. So yeah, definitely. I kind of went from yeah, I'm interested in going to Japan and learning about it, to being I'm gonna go back and want to learn more, and specifically I'm really interested in learning more about their sustainable agriculture programs that they have in place, and a lot of growing interest with that there, and how that's very similar and very different from what's going on here in the US as well. So.
I applied for the program because I'm really interested in international relations. I am a journalism major, and I actually also am getting a minor in Spanish, so I've always really been interested in other languages, and traveling and other cultures. And I just think it's really interesting to compare, comparative politics is really interesting to me, so that's what, got me to apply. I also had an aunt who lived in Japan for 10 years on a Department of Defense base, and she loved it, so she really encouraged me to go visit, and I wanted to experience it for myself. And I think I don't have current plans to go back to Japan, although I'd love to someday. But I just think it's really good. I just always live under the assumption that traveling anywhere outside your comfort zone is a good idea, and you'll learn something from that. So, and I definitely did, and I definitely would like to go back to Japan someday.
I went in with a very open mind. I did a little research, but I didn't want to have a bunch of, preconceived notions or assumptions before going in. I wanted to experience it firsthand. I think the best way to learn about a culture or a language is to have an experience like we had. And because I'm interested in communication, and specifically how people from different cultures can learn to communicate more efficiently and minimize miscommunication and misunderstanding. I guess went in with that lens, wanting to understand my own biases and my own beliefs about Japanese culture that were potentially incorrect. And I did learn a lot in that sense. And in terms of how, in terms of the trip and how it affected me, I'm not 100% sure yet, but I'm planning on going to grad school and then working on with another professor in my department on writing a book about U.S. and Japan intercultural communication, and basically just heavily analyzing communication patterns and how to improve business relations and personal relations between the two different countries, and how we can learn to communicate more efficiently.
Following up on what you say about getting to learn more and maybe break a couple of stereotypes or a couple of biases, what was the most surprising thing for a lot of you coming in Japan? I'm sure there was a great deal there. Since this is a follow-up to Brooke, we can give Laura a break and have Brooke start. Come back this way.
Honestly, the first thing that pops to my mind, this is a very superficial thing that just, I think for a lot of, they actually lectured us on this before we left and when we got there. But it was, and this is silly, but it was actually the bathroom situation in Japan, because the plumbing is different, and I think the amount of time spent on explaining to us like how to use like a sink or a toilet in Japan was comical, but that was a very large difference I recognized. Also, just punctuality was something that I think living in Missoula, Montana, I, for example, showed up here a little bit late today. It was not an issue. However, if I had been a minute late in Japan, it would have been frowned upon, to say it lightly.
I guess for me, I was really surprised and really impressed by the amount of renewable energy initiatives going on there, especially compared to here. It's kind of like a constant frustration for me how this happens in the US. But there, it's just like, it's very integrated in everything else. So like, we would be driving down a freeway in Kumamoto and there'd be like farm field, solar panel field, farm field, solar panel field. And that's like, powering the farms and powering the city and powering the streetlights that are over the freeway. And that same thing was very obvious in Tokyo, where most of the newer buildings had solar panels on them. And it just seemed to be a little bit more of a like accepted thing that this was a good idea to be doing, and just kind of integrated rather than like, I feel like here it's a lot of separation, and like that's like an entirely different sphere of development than like just building a building, but there it's very integrated. And I guess that wasn't really a preconception, but that was something that surprised me and really impressed me there.
I guess I kind of had an idea going in, and it turned out to be very false, but I thought people would maybe be very reserved, and I'm kind of a shy person myself, so I wasn't, I just kind of expected that for the culture to be very reserved and quiet, and they're very, very polite, and I knew that, but I felt like people made a huge effort to try to communicate with us and try to talk to us, even though there was a language barrier, and people were very polite, but also very outgoing and very open to communicating. And I felt guilty. I wish I had known more Japanese when I was there, to try to make more of an effort. And I think that's something I definitely try to do when I go back, because people are so willing to talk with us and communicate. So that was really great.
I guess something that kind of surprised me was the connection that the people had to historical monuments such as the Kumamoto Castle. I was talking to, when we went to the dinner at the German restaurant, I was sitting next to a woman, and she described to me how a lot of people after the earthquake went to the castle and just wept at the destruction. Just as a community, they just all came together and just mourned the damage that had occurred. And then she also said to me, we mourned and then we moved forward and we started working on it collectively. And I just thought it was really beautiful that that the castle and other structures like that have such cultural importance, and that it really, just as in other natural disasters, in the U.S. even, just how that brings communities together and made them a lot stronger and made them really think about how they can improve the structures and also create jobs around it and also try to improve local economy in other ways in the aftermath of disasters like that.
And all of you talked about how when you were in Japan, you were surprised by, as the title of this talk is, the Japan-Montana connection, how many people in Japan had been to Montana, had been to Missoula, which can be a surprising thing when you're abroad. I've been abroad, and if I tell people I'm from Montana, they're like, is that in the US? What is that? So now that you have been to Japan and come back, are you seeing those same kind of connections here? Like, what connections do you see to Japan here in Missoula now that maybe you're more aware of or have the chance to take advantage of?
Just this morning, I was hearing, as a journalism major, I was listening to someone talk about some news story ideas at MTPR, and someone was saying that there's a brewing company in Missoula that's like looking to try to trade with Kumamoto, like a brewing company in Kumamoto, just because they are our sister state. And I thought that was so interesting because I never would have had any connection to that before. I didn't know about it. I grew up in Montana, and I didn't know that we had a sister city in Japan. And so just today, I was hearing about, how there's going to be this new trade relation with this brewing company in Montana, and I think that it's just really cool. So.
Any other?
I've noticed since I've gotten back, noticed a lot of people talking about studying abroad there, and I don't know, maybe I just wasn't paying attention before to people talking about where they were studying abroad, but yeah, there's quite a few people from the school who go to schools in Japan for exchange programs, and we have like direct relations with a couple universities. I think one of them is in Kumamoto, and then some Tokyo ones as well. I didn't know about that, and now that I've gotten back and talked to people, there's quite a few people I know who've been there, which is cool.
I think for me, it was really cool knowing the work that Senator Mike Mansfield has done in establishing these relationships. It was just really cool to see that firsthand, and to see how the relationships have developed over time and been sustained, and that there is such an interest between these two countries, just because, I mean, Japan is an amazing culture, an amazing country, and it's just, maybe I've become more aware of it, having gone to Japan, just hearing about Mike Mansfield. I'm just more aware of the work that he's done and how that's impacted Missoula.
Ask a question. Did you find people asking you about Mike Mansfield or mentioning his name?
Definitely mentioning his name, yeah. And I think a lot of us went in having some idea of what he's done, but the program itself is a prime example of how his legacy has been carried on, and how people in the university system here want to continue that relationship, and just seeing the benefits of it in our alliance with Japan.
Follow up, did they mention Jane Mansfield? It never says Mike, but they mentioned
Maureen.
I'm sorry?
His wife, Maureen.
Maureen. Oh,
Maureen.
okay, all right.
Definitely, yeah. I definitely heard Maureen's name, yeah, a
Is
few
that right?
times when we were over there.
Yeah, I think it's I think it's really fun to, like, being from Montana. We are such a small state. We are such a close-knit community, and when you hear someone else is from Montana or someone has done good from Montana, it's just really nice to make that connection. So yeah, Mike Mansfield. I mean, such a pride for Montana that he's from here, and yeah, I just really enjoyed that as well, to have that connection.
We are just about out of time. Any final thoughts you would like to share? Oh, wait,
Yeah,
we'll do a final question instead.
Yeah, also from the administrative point of view, and I need to ask this question. So, if the University of Montana were to give him another opportunity to participate in the Kakehashi project in the future, in what way would do you think this program can be improved? Say application process, organizing trips and reporting of the trips, etc.
I believe that, and this is my opinion, but the University of Montana side of the application program and like the information meetings, it was very efficient. What would have been nice, and really the only critique I had, is a little bit more in depth as to what the program was about. Because I feel as though a lot of us showed up expecting a program about some of the topics they mentioned, such as like agriculture and then international communications, when in reality a lot of it was focused on business. So I think just having a greater understanding of what the students are going into would help.
I think that's true for me as well, just because I was a journalism major and I didn't realize it was so focused on business, but that wouldn't have changed. I would do it all over again, even though it was focused on economics, because that's useful for everybody. But I agree, it would have been nice to just have like a little bit more information about what the program would entail.
Yeah, it would have been nice on this side of also just being able to kind of prepare for what we were going to, because I also, I'm like a natural resource major, and I don't really know very much about economics or business, and that's maybe a shortfalling of my own, but it would have been nice to have been able to kind of like look up stuff and research a little bit and like kind of know what the trade relationship between the US and Japan was before I went, rather than kind of getting schooled all at once that first day. So I'd agree with what they both said about a little bit more background information.
I would agree. There were in the group of 23 of us, there were people from a diverse, a diversity of majors, and I thought that was really a really cool part of the trip, because we could all bring something to the experience. But I agree that it did have more of a business economics focus, which I think, like Claire said, kind of schooled us all in the first few days, just learning all of that at the same time. I think an area of improvement, it could be a little more clarification about the focus of the program and what the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and JICE is, what they're hoping to get from us. So maybe just more clarification on both ends as to if you want a group of diverse majors, what that is doing for their program, but also for us on our end. I think it would make sense if you were to repeat the program and have the same format as we had in November, to maybe have more business majors apply if you want that specific focus. But if the program were to change at all, to maybe focus more on kind of what we're studying, communication or journalism or social sciences, to kind of incorporate that maybe a little. But I thought it was fine. It was fine. Either way, we learned so much, and there were some of us, even like the grad students in the business school, that they had been introduced to a lot of the concepts that we learned, and so it was nice to learn from them, like from their studies, a little bit more. Yeah.
Thank you for all those insights and for that question. We do hope to be able to bring the Kakehashi program back again. We had fabulous interest from the UM community. Just to give you an idea of how wonderful these participants are and the applicants, we had over 200 applications started and well over 100 completed, and these were some of the only 23 students that we could choose to go on the program. So we are really hoping we're going to be able to give the opportunity to more, because we know that there's definitely the interest. But for now, thank you so much for coming and sharing your thoughts on the program today. Thank you. Thank you.